When it comes to the fight against insurance companies, large corporations, and the healthcare industry, injured victims are always the underdog. But that doesn't worry us. At Messa & Associates, we're an injury law firm from Philadelphia, and we come to fight. Our clients know that they've got representation with a chip on its shoulder, and it's the same chip that makes Philly the toughest city in the country. Call 215-568-3500 or visit us online at messalaw.com. Messa & Associates, the toughest injury firm in Philadelphia.
EAGLES, Eagles.
Eagles fans, welcome back to another edition of Football 24/7. I'm your guy, Tone DeShields II. Appreciate you guys for always liking on the content, and I'm here with our Eagles insider, John McMullen. First and foremost, smash that like button. Make sure you guys are subscribed to the JAKIB Sports YouTube channel. All the support you guys provide really helps the content grow and really helps the YouTube channel grow. So we appreciate you guys so much. Again, make sure you guys smash that like button before you guys get too comfortable because the sports talk is about to be underway. Now, your Philadelphia Eagles, 8-1 at the bye week. Now, I know some of us had maybe a 7-2 record, maybe a 7-2 or a 5-3 record, depending on how things dropped, because the Super Bowl hangover is a real thing, right? Some teams can defy it, but so far the Philadelphia Eagles have tried to keep it at bay. But still, there are a lot of people who don't necessarily believe in the Philadelphia Eagles 8-1 record, John. And, to me, 8-1 is 8-1, and it's hard to win in this NFL, especially when you're coming off of a letdown the way they did in that Super Bowl, losing by 3 points, right? So I'm curious to know, through this 9-game stretch that we've experienced with the Philadelphia Eagles, what's been your overall thought process? How have you viewed this team? How do you compare this team to the 2022 8-1 to the 2023 8-1?
I'm surprised a little bit about how seamless it's been. 8-1, I expected probably 2, maybe even 3 losses by this point. So anytime you have as much turnover, not even bringing in that human nature aspect of the Super Bowl hangover, as you mentioned, it's pretty impressive that they've been able to persevere and win some games, even though people aren't be happy with the style points. I'm also impressed about how consistently good this team is. If you look at the 13 different categories that PFF looks at, basically they're all above average, which is rare for any team. Even number one, which would be Miami, they have a couple bad spots. San Francisco, bad spot. Baltimore, tackling has been an issue. Buffalo, tackling has been a really big issue for Buffalo. Dallas, it's pass blocking. Detroit, it's they have some issues. Minnesota, it's pass rush, and the Eagles are pretty consistent. The worst would be coverage, obviously, but still kind of above water. And it's rare you see it. Even last year's team, good. Then you got the special teams was basically bottom 5 all year. Now they got a top 10 special teams unit. So I think the coaching staff gets a lot of credit. The new coordinator should get a lot of credit. And obviously, Howie Roseman deserves a lot of credit for building this team and not only the personnel they have, but also when there is an issue, going out and getting someone, whether it's Bradley Roby late, even if you go back to the summer with Zach Cunningham, obviously the Kevin Byard trade. When you look at that sort of sense of urgency versus some of the other contenders,
Right.
that part of it's good as well.
You know, what's fascinating, right? You brought up the turnover, right? The coaching turnover, the roster turnover, and Howie has done a pretty decent job at trying to mitigate. How do you say? He's played a lot of damage control, and I feel like he's did a pretty good job of mitigating a lot of the risks that this team probably could face, or maybe the threats that he possibly could face with the roster turnover and coaching turnover. Speak on that, right? Because I don't think that gets spoken about enough through this 9-game stretch. Again, they're 8-1, and they've gone through tremendous roster turnover on the defensive side. They've battled injuries. They've gone through coaching turnover. Not only did the offensive coordinator and the defensive coordinator change, you have a new defensive backs coach, right? You have a new linebackers coach. Not many guys not many guys stuck around after their Super Bowl run because they got bigger opportunities. Speak on how difficult that is for a team to overcome that and still win in spite of all those changes.
Yeah, I mean, the consistency is the most impressive part of this organization. Yeah, I always talk about that number. We're at 27 consecutive weeks, regular season weeks, where they've been the top team in the NFL or tied for the top team in the NFL record-wise. And that doesn't happen very often in this particular era. New England, obviously, during the Brady days, has been able to be very consistent. Peyton Manning was able to be very consistent at times. Green Bay, with their history with Aaron Rodgers, very consistent from a regular season standpoint. It's not easy. It's not easy to win in this league, and you see it, Kansas City has lost 2 times. San Francisco's lost 3 times. These are all the perceived powerhouses coming into the season. Buffalo has lost 4 times. Cincinnati obviously struggled mightily during the start of the season, seemed to be getting back on track. They've lost 3 times. Miami, everybody was enamored with Miami. They've lost 3 times. The Cowboys have lost 3 times. It's not easy to win in this league. It really isn't, because you don't have those. I always talk about college football. Bottom line is, if you're a big time college football team, and insert name, whatever you want, Georgia, Alabama, want to go some Big Ten teams with Penn State and Michigan, you basically have maybe 3 games a year where you're tested. And it depends on what you do in those 3 games as to how you're going to finish. Everything else is kind of a glorified scrimmage. It ain't that way in the NFL. There are some bad teams, obviously, but if you don't bring your A game, especially early in the season. Now, as things get later, you do have that sort of teams giving up mindset, and that's real. And, you'll have other teams that don't want to win because they want to manipulate draft spacing and all that kind of thing. But especially in the first half of the season, it doesn't matter if it's the New York Giants have won twice, and they're the worst team in football. Arizona, everybody laughed at that team. They've won a game. Everybody's won a game. Carolina's won a game. Denver's won 3 games. They look like an abject disaster. Anybody can win in this league if you don't bring your A game. And you already saw it. The Eagles, maybe their easiest game on their schedule, turned out to be, in the first half, the New York Jets, not because the Jets don't have a good roster, but because they lost Aaron Rodgers and they were playing Zach Wilson. That's a gimme from an NFL perspective, and it's the game they lost, Tom.
Right.
That's a gimme, and they lost it. And that proves it right there.
Yeah, I was talking to Rob Ellis yesterday, and we went over, the roster turnover, specifically the guys they've lost and the guys they brought in to attempt to replace those guys, right? You lose Miles Sanders, you bring in DeAndre Swift. You lose Isaac Seumalo, you elevate Jurgens and draft Tyler Steen. You lose TJ Edwards, you bring in Morrow, you try to elevate Dean. He can't stay healthy, but Morrow steps in this print and plays solid. You lose Kaiser White, you bring in Zach Cunningham. You lose CJ you trade for Kevin Byard, and you elevate Reed Blankenship. You lose Epps, again, Reed Blankenship. You lose Javon Hargrave. You draft Jalen Carter. If you really look at this and try to be as objective as possible, you can make an argument Howie Roseman got better in certain areas and is getting a bit more value based off what those guys are getting paid now. The perfect example is you draft Jalen Carter, and he's already a better player than Javon Hargrave, who hasn't had a sack in the past several weeks, and they're paying him north of $20 million right now. The 49ers had to go and get 2 more pass rushers in Gregory and Chase Young, to try to generate more pass rushers on the defensive line. We know Javon Hargrave isn't a really good run defender. Jalen Carter can do both of those things at an extremely high level at a rookie salary. So just speak on Howie Roseman's ability to manipulate those type of situations and how he's replenished and reloaded this roster with some players that are either on the same level as the guys he brought in previously, and speak on just how he's trying to get value in his decision making.
Yeah, I mean, Howie's, and I've been on this train for a long time as one of the best general managers in football, and that's obvious. But I do feel the need when people go over the top like you just went, Tone. I do feel the need to temper a little bit. Javon Hargrave's a very good player. In the rest of the NFL gifted Howie Roseman, Jalen Carter, who's a tremendous player. But remember, Jalen Carter is in a perfect situation, not only from, and I'm the biggest Jalen Carter guy there is. I've been saying this is ridiculous since day one at the league. This was the best player in the draft, all of that. But, not only does he have the ecosystem here with his friends and Jordan Davis, Jalen Carter, Kaylee Ringo, N'Kobe as well. Nolan Smith, if I mentioned, whoever I forgot to mention, if I didn't mention, that's part of it. They also have the deepest line in football, so he doesn't play a ton. If you want to look at reps,
right? I think he's getting about 49% of the defensive reps right now.
Yeah, Javon plays a lot more because he's got to play a lot more, so that factors into it. But you're right. I mean, yeah, and I said it when San Francisco, Javon Hargrave is a very good player. He's not a $20 million a year player. So those are the difficult decisions you have to make. But San Francisco is very happy with Javon Hargrave.
I'm sure.
He's not the issue. And they're not going to get edge rushers because of Javon Hargrave.
Right.
They're going to get edge rushers because of the reason the Eagles want a 4th edge rusher. Right. They want to excuse me, I have a bit of a cold, so
understood.
They want to come at you in waves, and it's Nick Bosa and then a bunch of other guys that are trying to get up to speed to provide that constant pass rush pressure from the edge, and sometimes they have it, sometimes they don't. The Eagles have been looking forward for 2 years. The Eagles have Hassan Reddick, Josh Sweat, Brandon Graham, and they still won a 4th. And they can't find the 4th. They drafted Nolan Smith. Hopefully he can get up to speed. They keep giving Derek Barnett chances. They want the 4th guy too. Everybody wants that. And the 49ers are no different. And similar to what I said about Howie Roseman, I give John Lynch credit for going out and getting guys like that to try to improve because he thinks the window's open there. I think the 49ers' biggest issue remains the quarterback, and I continue to say that. And I hope Jody Mack isn't listening. But, I don't believe in the quarterback. So that's their biggest issue.
Yeah, I guess for me, I just think it's remarkable, and you give Harry Roseman a lot of credit. I tend to do the same. I just think it's remarkable how he's had these significant losses. And look, TJ Edwards is having a great season in Chicago, despite them being a very terrible team all the way around. PFF I think has him with an overall grade of I think 80 or 82 or something. I can't exactly
Yeah,
remember what it was,
he's
but
a very good player. That
he's a
kinda,
very good
if
player.
there's something that that I wouldn't say bothers me, but I guess bothers is the right word about Eagles fan base is that they dismiss players as soon as they leave.
I don't
Oh, he
like that,
wasn't
Evan.
that good. He
I
wasn't
don't
that
like
good.
that. I think that's one of the
Yeah.
most asinine ways of thinking for any fan base, right? We all know damn well TJ Edwards was the best linebacker the Eagles had in a while, and he was productive. He did the job perfectly for the most part, and he was the quarterback back there. I felt like the Eagles dropped the ball. They could have had that man for 6 or 7 million, and it's still not even a high price tag for that position. It's
Yeah,
I
I
just
mean
think
that's more the valuation of the position. I thought the Eagles would take a little bit more pride in the fact that they developed him, but
that's what I thought.
you point out that grade. I mean, he's 16th right now in the NFL behind the worst defensive line in football. Last year was behind the best or certainly one of the top three, and he was, I believe, number 6. And you know, when you can play at that level, you look at Nick Morrow. Now, Nick Morrow, happy we can see, and who's played very well and deserves to be the starting Mike linebacker, and that's kind of a silver lining for the Eagles because they've been trying to get Nakobe Dean up to speed, understandably so, because that's their future. They believe that's their future. Um, but Nick has outplayed him and deserves to be on the field. Now he's 8th this season, 8th of 81 behind the Eagles front last year, and he played every game, was a starter for every game in Chicago. He was 64 of 81. That's the difference between playing behind the worst defensive front and playing behind the best defensive front. Now they're a little bit better, and they're going to get better because they got Montez Sweat, who showed up a little bit already. But you know, they just got Montez Sweat. They were terrible again this year, and TJ's still good.
Still
Still
good.
good.
Imagine if he was behind this front, the Philadelphia
Yeah.
Eagles have with Jalen Carter and those guys. Imagine that. So yeah, we're at the midseason mark, and again, Eagles are 8-1. I'm curious. Do you think the Philadelphia Eagles, based off everything they've experienced from week 1 to week 9, and even last season, right? Do you think the Eagles are more or less prepared for a playoff run? And I know a lot of people say, well, they're shaky 8-1, they won ugly, all this kind of stuff, and they haven't really blown any teams out or whatever compared to last season. Last year during the first half of the stretch, they were, kind of, having their way with teams, but the schedule's gotten more difficult this year. They're going up against a higher tier of coaches, if you ask me. Are the Eagles more or less prepared for a playoff run now than they were last year, just based off of the circumstances that they've had to overcome and that they're experiencing through the first 9 weeks?
Let me see the injury report entering the playoffs. That's where are they
Good point.
prepared? They're prepared. I mean, they have so much better in leadership. They've gone through it. They have a quarterback who's doesn't get overly doesn't get overwhelmed by the moment. Let's put it that way, as certain quarterbacks in Dallas can occasionally be. But so I mean, they have all their ducks in a row, and the fact that this, they have so much playoff experience with the Kelseys, the Fletcher Coxes, the Brandon Grahams, Lane Johnson, etc. Yeah, they're prepared. But everything in this league is dependent on health.
That's true. That's true, and you're right. They from a roster perspective and experience perspective, they are prepared. I definitely will agree with you on that regard. But we tend to talk about the human element of this game that kind of gets lost. When we're kind of in the thick of a season. I'm more so focused on that human element, right? This team over these first 9 weeks, They've had situations where they were down at the half. They've had to come back. They faced a tremendous amount of adversity. We talked about the injuries that they've had to overcome. There's a mental part of this game, an emotional part of this game that I feel that I personally feel gets overlooked at times. When you're constantly blowing teams out, that's not a true indication of what life's going to be like in the playoffs, if you ask me. But when you're in these battles week after weekend, you're forced to always be on high alert each and every week. Because teams are giving you their A game, they're giving you their best because they know, you're at the top of the mountain with the Kansas City Chiefs, and every team is trying to mirror what you're doing. Every team is using you as a measuring stick. Those are a lot of things to kind of battle against, along with the things we mentioned earlier, roster turnover. So speak on the human element, the mental and emotional element of it all, that these guys could potentially be more prepared.
Yeah, I get that a lot. I heard Jody ask me that question this week. I want to see him come back in the fourth quarter. Why the hell do you want to see him come back in the fourth quarter? That's the last place you want to be. Every team in this league wants to play from a lead. The Eagles' biggest deficit this year was 14-3 Washington early in the game at Washington. And I probably told you, in the press box, I said, maybe this isn't the Eagles' day. I just talked about how everybody loses.
Right.
And maybe, Washington has their number. And then Jalen Hurts takes on one of those drives and it's 14-10. I quickly surmised, Washington's not going to be able to hold up against this. And they played a little bit better than I expected, to be honest. But ultimately, they couldn't hold up. I don't need this team to prove anything as far as getting behind in the fourth quarter. They've proven they can do it every which way. I don't know how much more they can prove to people when it comes to style points. They don't matter, to put it bluntly. Was it ugly down the stretch against Dallas? Yes. I'm right about the slot situation in the first half. It's kind of amazing. I mean, the butterfly effect of how many different ways they've had to go. After the bye, Bradley Roby should be back. Kevin Byard should get better and better. As I said, coverage is the worst aspect of this team so far this season, and it's still above average. You want to see him come back from two scores in the fourth quarter? What sense does that make? Why do you want to see that?
Me personally, my blood pressure couldn't handle it. My blood pressure couldn't handle it. So I don't know if I want to see it. But
think about that from a coaching perspective, because Nick got asked that question as well at some point a number of weeks ago. And go, no. He's like, why would you encourage that? That's the last thing you want to do. Now, the question is, if you get behind, can you come back? And I think the answer they already proved in the Super Bowl. I mean, everybody was, woe was me. When I was watching the Kelsey documentary on Amazon, it jumps back into you. What they're down. And Jalen Hurts, that drive, it was the big pass to Devontae Smith. They're down 8. Bang! It was just bang, bang. That's how quickly they came back, and they needed the 2-point conversion. They got the 2-point conversion.
Yeah.
But guess what? You didn't want to be in that position. Oh, they proved they could come back, but then you're in a situation where Kansas City gets the football in a shootout, and one play. And I had Jason Kelsey mic'd up, and everybody's probably seen it even before the documentary. And Bradbury gets called for the holding, which was holding, but, big stage. Should you call it? Shouldn't you call it? And Kelsey's just shaking his head. That's it. Game over. That quick. You put it in, one thing goes wrong, game's over. So why would you want to be in that situation?
I understand. So you brought up a good point, right? That margin of error, right? When you're behind, the margin of error becomes slimmer. Because of the way things are going for the Philadelphia Eagles this season, it seems like they have a tremendously less margin of error this season compared to how things were going last year. Is that fair to surmise?
I don't know if it is fair to surmise in. I think people forget the bad games they had last season. Um,
The Colts was a rough one.
the Colts, they
That was
should have
probably the
lost
ugliest
that
game.
game.
Yes, you're right. You're right.
Jalen Hurts put him on his back in the fourth quarter. They were terrible in that game. And I remember being there and, sitting there and saying, "Oof, this team." And that was the first game they were out Dallas Goedert, and they really struggled offensively. And you started to say, "Do they miss Dallas that much?" Um, so I think performances like that get lost in the sauce, so to speak. The Jacksonville game, now it was in
It-
a
they were
torrential downpour. That
they were
was a
down
great.
14-0 in the first quarter.
They had the better backup kicker in Arizona. That's the only reason they won that game. Uh, that was the Cameron Dicker game versus the Matt Amendola game, and their backup kicker sucked, and the Eagles' backup kicker was
Didn't.
good. And he's still been good, by the way. Cameron Dicker's been
Right. Isn't he the kicker for the
amazing.
Chargers or something like that? Where is he?
Yeah, Chargers done a tremendous job. I think he's missed 2 field goals since he got there, 2 or 3. He's been tremendous, and Arizona really outplayed him in that game.
Mhm.
Then they got on a little bit of a roll, but they were terrible in Houston. I think people forget before they kind of persevered against a very bad football team. I don't think anybody was paying attention because the Eagles were playing the Astros in the World Series at the time.
I remember that game. That was a interesting game because they couldn't stop the run at all in that game.
Yeah. Who's Texans back? Really
Damian
explosive.
Pierce, right?
Yes, very good player.
Very good young guy.
They struggled with him, and then they had they shootout win over Green Bay. They destroyed Tennessee, but remember, Tennessee had so many injuries. We talk about injuries; they had so many injuries coming into that game. The Giants, the Eagles have their number. The Eagles played terribly in Chicago, and that's the game Jalen Hurts got hurt in. But the Bears were one of the worst teams in football, so they persevered. Then came the Gardner Minshew games where they lost, and then they played terrible in Week 18 against the Giants backups, which is one of the worst things that happened to the Giants because they thought they were closer to the Eagles than they really were. Jalen Hurts was forced to play in that game, wasn't 100%. There were a lot of non-style point games that people forget about.
That goes back to your original point, though. The fact that any team can get touched at any given Sunday. Like, you can't just go into these matchups thinking that, all these games are a gimme, so to speak, right? No matter how good you are, you're like the Chiefs lost to the Colts last year, right? So, I mean, no one remembers that. Obviously, you win the Super Bowl, who cares? So, we brought up Jalen Hurts, right, and his ability to just kind of put this team on his back, right? Obviously, his 2022 campaign went the way it did. He was an MVP candidate, was a second-team All-Pro, had essentially what many would call a breakout season. This year, things started a little bit rocky. Struggled protecting the ball a little bit. But what we're seeing here over the past few weeks, we're seeing him continuing, and you can make an argument even throughout the entire season. What we're seeing, to me, we're seeing this offense, in my opinion, going through some sort of evolution. They're passing the ball more. He's on pace for, I believe, 100 to 150 more pass attempts this year. He's on pace for more touchdowns. He's on pace for more interceptions, but that's the name of the game where you're throwing the ball more. He's on pace for more yards, so to speak. So what's been your personal thoughts about Jalen Hurts and his development, not just from last season, but also over this past 9-game stretch? Because to me, I'm looking at Jalen Hurts. He's becoming damn near a true pocket quarterback. These past few games, he hasn't really been relying on his legs to get things done. So what's been your thoughts on his overall development?
No, his development as a passer has been astonishing. And as you mentioned, the past 3 games, basically since the Rams game when he hurt his knee, but the last 3 games specifically, and our buddy Paul Domowitch put the numbers up: 125.5 passer rating over the last 3 games, completing 75% of his passes. 8.7 yards per attempt, which would be near the top of the league, and 8 touchdowns versus 1 interception. And that's without the threat of the running game. He's right back in the conversation for MVP. And, if you ask me, I would vote for Lamar Jackson #1 right now.
I think that's fair, though.
And he would be #2, right where he was last year. I would vote for him again ahead of Patrick Mahomes. Yes. And look, I'm the first one to tell you wins and losses aren't a quarterback stat. It drives me crazy when people boil it down to quarterback versus quarterback, and because there's 100 different ways you can win a football game. Like, and the Eagles have won 8 of 9. And the biggest mismatch again at that position was the game they lost. So if that doesn't explain to you why you shouldn't put everything on the shoulder of the quarterback in any particular city, nothing will. The Eagles have lost 1 game, and it was to Zach Wilson. But he's won 25 of 27 starts. When it gets to that level, and the people that have done that in the modern era, Brady, Manning, Montana, I forget the 4th. He's the 5th. Might be Jim McMahon with those great Bears teams. Think about those names.
I'm with you, John.
Consistency from week to week.
But why is there still so much illegitimacy surrounding this guy's growth and development and how he's performing?
I don't know where that.
I'm with you, John. Like I'm totally with you. But there still seems to be this narrative surrounding Jalen Hurts and his growth, his development, and where he is. Like, let's be honest, right? People are quick to say,
I don't know where. There's a lot of people who say, our social media, I say it all the time, our social media people do a great job. Sometimes they put up quotes. They put up a quote of mine that I wrote about Jalen Hurts back in 2021, where I said he would never be a top-tier quarterback in this league. That was my opinion at that particular time. I was wrong. Too many people can't admit this is what we do. We talk about this team every day. Guess what? I get shit wrong all the time. Luckily, I get more stuff right than I get wrong. But everybody gets stuff wrong. But there's a lot of people, when they get something wrong, they don't want to shift gears and say, because they didn't see it coming. I don't care. One of the things, and Louis Riddick pointed this out, and I mentioned it on Birds 365, and because I've been saying it for years, and I'm glad Louis put it out there, too many people think you draft a good player or you don't draft a good player, and that's it.
It's not that simple ever.
On draft night. And they say, oh, he was always this good. The people that claim they always knew Jalen. No, he wasn't. He worked his ass off. He's the one who went out to work with Adam Daydew and Tom House. He's the one who works all. He's the one who gets in there and studies film and tells, hey, Nick Sirianni, get out of here. Let's go watch film. He's the one who does all that. So Lewis said, 1, research and evaluation. 2, valuation selection when he's talking about draft picks. 3, development utilization. You got to develop these players and you got to utilize them correctly.
I think it's almost disrespectful to just assume that when these guys come in, they're just that guy. They are who they are. No, they had to.
So many people
in preparation have to opportunity and preparation have to coincide. And it's almost disrespectful to me to just think that, when Jalen Hurts got here, he always was that guy. We just had to realize it. No, he put that damn work in. And to undermine a guy's level of work ethic just because we want to win an argument with our friends is asinine to me, right?
It's ridiculous.
You said something about how you had a post in 2021 and they held you to the fire, right? And I had this tweet.
It pops up to this day. They pop it up and they act like, and I'm like, yeah, I don't care. I mean, you care. I don't care.
Hear this, right? I had this tweet that you that you really you found some joy in, right? You had to laugh out of. I wrote, and this was on October 30th. I said, some of y'all host sports pundits to their word like politicians. Relax. It's entertainment at the end of the day. You know what I mean? Like it's so strange how you can make an observation
Well,
based off the
they hold.
information you have.
Sadly, some people hold us to higher than politicians.
That's
Who are
that
actually,
was the point of my thing, right?
yeah,
You hold us to more.
yeah,
You hold us to a higher standard than than your own politicians, right?
yeah.
You're more likely to allow your local politician to get one over you than a sports writer or a guy in broadcasting, and it's
Yeah.
fascinating to me.
It's it's a constantly evolving thing when it comes to player development, and Jalen Hurts deserves all the credit in the world, and so do his coaches and the people that have helped him along the way. And the Eagles organization putting him in the right spot, building the right way around him, all these things. I always bring up Andy Reid in 1999 and all the quarterbacks taken in that draft, and Andy got the one he wanted. But I often wonder if Akili Smith ended up in Philadelphia, or Tim Couch ended up in Philadelphia, and Donovan had to go to one of their crappy situations. How would it have worked out? Andy probably wouldn't have gotten the guy that he wanted, but he would have made insert name into a pretty good quarterback. And those other situations, Donovan probably would have been up against it. There's a lot of situations, if Jalen Hurts got drafted, he wouldn't be the player he is today.
Because of opportunity.
He might have done the same things. He might have improved to the point that he was working with different quarterback coaches, mechanic coaches in the offseason. He might have done all the same stuff he's doing here, but he still didn't have the organization behind him who also built the right way, who also was willing to build the offense around his skill set. One of the things I tell people all the time, and I tell Seth all the time, run first, pass first, run first, pass first. Eagles are neither. I say it all the time. They're not a run first team. They're not a pass first team. They're a Jalen Hurts first team. Now think about how many organizations would do the same thing. They try to pound the square peg in the round hole. They tried to turn him into maybe a pocket passer too soon, or maybe they embraced his running ability and he got injured in a more serious fashion. 150 things could have happened. But all these things factor into it. So for all the, and I'm going to use the word, I'll go Howard on them. For all the morons, all the dopes that think, oh, I knew on draft day that Jalen Hurts was going to be a great quarterback. Hey, if you believe it, Godspeed. There's a lot of work that went into it between that day and this day that we're talking about right now.
It's just that simple, John. Before we get out of here, again, we spoke about the MVP race briefly. You had Lamar Jackson as your as your guy in pole position right now, with Jalen Hurts inching behind him. I'm curious, right, with this 5-game stretch coming up, man, and everyone's been talking about it and deeming it murderer's row, the gauntlet. Can the Eagles survive? This is the ultimate test for Jalen Hurts and the Philadelphia Eagles. This is the toughest stretch.
Well, they already got
in the
one.
NFL. Right, exactly. This is the toughest stretch in football right now. They had the number one hardest schedule in the NFL. Yada yada yada. So people have elevated this schedule to that level, right? People have done that. So my question to you is this: with the 8-1 record they have currently, and with Jalen Hurts trending up, if the Philadelphia Eagles and Jalen Hurts find a way to go, let's say 4-1 over this stretch, finding a way to beat any one of those teams and they drop one, whatever. If they find a way to go 4-1 over that stretch, should Jalen Hurts be considered the leader in the MVP voting? Is he almost guaranteed the MVP?
No, it depends what Lamar does. I mean, and Patrick as well. I mean, let's take for instance.
But again, they say no one's had a 5-game stretch this hard. He's going up against
Well,
he's
I
going to
don't
get
know.
against Mahomes.
I don't know who says that, but why isn't it a 6-game stretch? I mean, everybody forgets Dallas already. I can't play into the hyperbole.
Dallas isn't. Well, you're right. The 6-game stretch because you're counting the very first
Yeah,
Dallas matchup. Yeah, that's a 6-game stretch.
I
Exactly.
can't play into the hyperbole that much because again, if you go back, the most difficult part of this stretch to me is 3 of the games on the road because Kansas City's forget about being a good team. That's an extremely tough place to play. Arrowhead at Seattle's extremely tough place to play. The 12th man in Seattle at Dallas, the Eagles. It's kind of been a house of horrors for them down there recent years. Those are 3 really, really difficult road games. Now, they already beat Dallas at home, the other 3. Buffalo doesn't look nearly as good as they were supposed to be. San Francisco doesn't look as good as they're supposed to be. So, all this stuff is always moving. You know,
It's
if
fluid.
it's always fluid. If Dak gets hurt, all of a sudden Dallas isn't as difficult. Seattle, is Seattle really? Seattle's a good team. Are they really a great team? Come
They've
on,
come back down to earth, if you ask me.
they're not. They're not a great team. Let's be honest. So all of this and Buffalo, on the other hand, they don't look good. They've lost 4 stinking games, Buffalo. But I will tell you, if Josh Allen's got his A game on a particular game day, you're probably in trouble. Because that dude's unbelievable. He also might turn it over 4 times. So tell me which Josh Allen is going to show up. But yeah, it's a difficult stretch. I don't think it's the most difficult stretch in world history. I as far as the MVP race, Jalen Hurts is going to be in it. A lot of it depends on what the other players do. Patrick Mahomes has sort of a default setting. Most people think he's the best player in football. They're probably right. I think Lamar's been the best player this year. If that continues, then he should be the MVP. But Jalen, either way, I mean, Jalen's in the conversation. And if you're in the conversation, that's pretty good.
Yeah, I think the odds have Lamar ahead, and then Jalen Hurts is second, and I believe Mahomes is third in the odds in Vegas. But final question, John: Are the Eagles on their bye week, right? What, in your opinion, what are the top 3 things that need to be a priority for the Philadelphia Eagles over the next, over this entire bye week, over this entire time off? What are the top 3 things that they need to focus on or improve on, or they need to make sure is in order before they face the Kansas City Chiefs?
It's funny. I did the self scout for Sports Illustrated. My number 1 was obviously obvious. They got to settle down the coverage issues on the back end. I think largely that's dependent. Bradley Roby's already tweeted he's going to be back. I think that'll calm things down. Kevin Byard, I think, they got to make a decision, and I think they've made that decision. So it's going to be Slay, Bradbury, Roby, Byard, Blankenship. As long as they stay healthy, I don't think it's going to be great, but it's going to get better. That's number 1. Number 2 is run the ball traditionally a little bit better. And by that, I mean that they don't run the ball well when the threat of Jalen Hurts isn't in the equation for the opposing defense. With the knee issue, teams are not threatened, and you see all of a sudden, since that Los Angeles game where Jalen got hurt, DeAndre Swift's averaging 3.1 yards per carry. So that pretty much sums up the impact Jalen Hurts has on the rushing game. That's got to be a little bit better. It doesn't have to be outrageous, but you got to be up near 4 at least. They need to get better at that. And then the third kind of took care of itself. I said, this team's a Super Bowl contender. They need to play the best players. Their best 2 linebackers are Nicholas Morrow, Zach Cunningham. I don't think they were going to make the move, but Nakobe Dean's going to be out for a while. And the silver lining to that is Nick Morrow's played better. You have to be honest.
Hopefully Howard can be honest about that, because if
Well, he doesn't have a choice now. That's what I'm saying. I mean,
right, but how
don't
much
get me
time
wrong.
is
If Nakobe Dean didn't get hurt, he'd be starting in Kansas City. They wouldn't have made that decision, but now they have to make that decision, and I think it's going to work out for them.
There you guys have it. You guys have been locked in on Football 24/7 with John McMullen, man. We appreciate you guys for always locking in on the content. Smash that like button. Make sure you guys remain engaged in the live streams and all the different shows that we have going on. And look, it's a bye week. You guys have off. You guys don't have to stress tomorrow. You guys don't have to sweat. You guys don't have to, worry about trying to get your pregame and halftime show dinner spread out. You guys can just relax, take it easy, kick your feet up, and really enjoy some football. Because I know for me personally, whenever I watch the Philadelphia Eagles, my blood's boiling. I get too excited. My wife hates being around me. All those things come into play. So, look, I'm grateful for the bye week. I needed it just as much as these Philadelphia Eagles, man. I need some TLC. So, John, I appreciate you for always making yourself available to me, especially on the weekends, man, where I know you can be doing a lot of other things. You could have been anywhere in the world, but you decided to be here with me, and I appreciate you, my man.
Not anywhere, but I could have been in a lot of places, but not anywhere.
On that note, you guys, smash that like button. You guys were locked in on Football 24/7 with John McMullen. I'm your host, Tone DeShields II, and we'll see you next time.
When it comes to the fight against insurance companies, large corporations, and the healthcare industry, injured victims are always the underdog. But that doesn't worry us. At Messon Associates, we're an injury law firm from Philadelphia, and we come to fight. Our clients know that they've got representation with a chip on its shoulder, and it's the same chip that makes Philly the toughest city in the country. Call 215-568-3500 or visit us online at messalaw.com.